the drive. Tatum the finish. It is Banner 18. The mission demanding is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of You Got Boston, a live edition in which we'll discuss a couple of different news items, starting with the biggest news of the day, and that's the really impressive play of Neemias Queta, who had just a monster performance for Portugal this morning at 7:45 a.m. Eastern Time. Honestly, for me, it was nice to have a reason to get up early because I have not had many reasons as of late, because we don't have, shoot-arounds or practices right now, obviously. So we'll talk about Queta's game. We'll also talk a little bit about what next year's starting lineup could look like. And I'll touch a little bit more about my conversation with Peyton Pritchard from last weekend. Last weekend was a crazy, off-season weekend. There were so many events. So I can talk a little bit about Peyton Pritchard, although I have a whole podcast episode you can find on CLNS Media about my conversation with Peyton, including some of his words and his voice that you can check out there on CLNS Media, as well as on my YouTube channel, You Got Boston Podcast. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, I also wanted to discuss Hugo Gonzalez, who I saw at two different events this past weekend and got to catch up with him and how he's acclimating to Boston. Really loving it. He's really loving the city, and the city's really loving him. And obviously, he has yet to play an NBA game, and yet I watched him for multiple hours signing autographs for fans. So it just kind of goes to show you the love the Celtics fans have, which you all know, all of you listeners, I'm sure, are not surprised to hear that. But yeah, very cool kind of slate of events. Busy couple of days for me as a Celtics reporter. It's been a lot of fun. I love going out in the community. Yes, we can spend all summer talking about, is the team going to be good? Are they going to be bad? Predictions. But to me, the best thing I can do is be out and talking to people and seeing the players and seeing the fans and all of that. So it was a fun couple of days from that standpoint. So let's start with the biggest news item of the day, and that's the play of Neemias Queta, who had just a monster game, as I said, for Portugal in a 62-50 win over the Czech Republic. Finished with 23 points on 10 of 15 shooting, 18 rebounds, 4 blocks, 2 steals. To make that stat line even more impressive, I think only two or a couple of people in EuroLeague history have posted it. So this is not a normal stat line, as you might imagine. He hit his only three-pointer of the game, which actually came on his first shot attempt. It was the first points of the game. And I literally was still in bed. It was 7:45, and I was just signing into the subscription service to watch Queta's performance. And I was like, was that Queta? I'm adjusting my glasses because I couldn't believe that the first play of the game, Queta, who has never made an NBA three-pointer, hits one from the top of the key. So that was a fun start. And then he actually beat the halftime buzzer with a kind of elbow shot at the buzzer, also a shot you would never see him take in the NBA. And just physically, he was by far the best player on the floor, the most dominant. He's the only current NBA player on either team. He's the only player ever from Portugal to be in the NBA. So that's, he's in his own company there anyways. But what was impressive was, offensively, he was formidable. And also he just did some things that you just don't see much in the NBA. And then, obviously, because he's the number one scoring option here, he scored 23 points out of 62. So that's even more than 23 points. So if you're converting that to an NBA game, this is a 45-point game because this is a low scoring one. But defensively, he was just everywhere. And it actually got to the point, and sometimes this is how I watch basketball, I'll put myself in the player's shoes. And there's really no reason for me to do it because I was never really that good, but I'll just kind of watch the game through their lens. And I was watching it through the lens of the Czech Republic players. And I was like, wow, they are so afraid of going at him and, anywhere that they were near the basket. He got 4 blocks on the box score, but there were 25 shots that he directly altered. It was really remarkable. It's not very often that you see one player on the defensive end impact so many guards attempts to go to the basket. And so he caused misses. He deterred players from attempting certain shots. But it was something special to watch. And I think from my standpoint, as a Celtics reporter who was watching this game through the lens of Queta is probably going to be the Celtics starting player next season, starting center next season. This made me think maybe there is actually something to this idea that they could be more competitive than most fans expect. And the biggest X factor to me heading into next season is Queta, because Jaylen Brown's going to be an all-star. He's an all-star player. He's a finals MVP. Like, whether he has an MVP level season or whether he has a slightly less efficient season because of all the pressure on him, like, I don't know. There's a range of outcomes still. But he's an all-star caliber player, right? Derek White is going to be awesome. Like, as long as these guys stay healthy, I kind of know what to expect. Even Peyton Pritchard, who I will talk more about him, but I think that he has a high ceiling. Like, there's a certain floor that I think we're pretty comfortable with as well. With Queta, we have no idea because he has limited NBA experience. I think he's played in just over 100 NBA games. Obviously was not really in the rotation for most of last year. Hasn't really been in the rotation consistently as a Celtic. And yet he's probably going to be the starting center at the beginning of next year. And so seeing these kinds of performances, like, yes, it was against, the Czech Republic. It's not like it was against one of these other NBA post players who he's about to face. He's going to face Jokic on Friday. He has Porzingis coming up on, I think, this weekend. So there's a bunch of games coming up. Like, Giannis is in this tournament as well. So, like, there's a lot coming here, but this wasn't one of those games. But it's hard. Like, these are battles, and Portugal hasn't won a EuroBasket game since 2007, I believe. So it's been a very long time, and there's no game that's like an easy cakewalk here. Like, this is national team. There's pride involved. There's physicality. There was a lot of physicality in this one, and so it's still, I think, very impressive. And I watched Porzingis and Alperen Sengun face off later in the day, and that was Latvia versus Turkey. And Porzingis really struggled in this one, and that's not me being like, let's all pile on Porzingis because he's not in the Celtics anymore. I'm just contextualizing that within the same tournament that Queta looked like an MVP. Porzingis struggled. He had 10 points on 3 of 12 shooting, 6 turnovers. He was a minus 17. I imagine that he turns it around. I also imagine that if Queta had played against Turkey, maybe it would have been a little bit more of a challenging game. That being said, that's what I watched today, and it left me feeling pretty encouraged about what he might be able to do in the Celtics front court next season. And again, we don't know how it's going to translate in the NBA. I think there's questions around defensively. Is he going to make some mistakes? Is there going to be a learning curve that is just kind of like insurmountable? There's other guys that are going to battle for front court minutes. Chris Boucher, who we've talked about a little bit. Luka Garza. I haven't even talked about these guys in a while, but that's the front court. Xavier Tillman might get in there and fight for some opportunities. We know that's another guy that we didn't really see much of last season. But Queta, in my eyes, is the starting center heading into next season. And that's, what does that mean? I don't know. I don't know if that's a problem or if that's a good thing or whatnot, but that's where he's going to start. And watching today's game, I did feel pretty excited about like what that might look like. Again, there are 2 returning Celtic starters from last season, Derek White and Jaylen Brown. I think Queta is going to be the kind of an obvious center starter. I think Peyton Pritchard is going to be a starter as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that because he doesn't actually know. I asked him about it. He was kind of laughing that he's seen the discourse and everything, kind of the debate between whether he should start or Anthony Simons should start. So we'll chat a little bit more about that momentarily here. But Queta has an opportunity to be one of their most important players. And so, yeah, we'll see kind of how that plays out. But really an awesome debut for him. If you're wondering, like, where can I watch Queta's next game? Because honestly, like, it's been a long time since we've had NBA basketball to watch. If you want to watch some of these players, Giannis, Luka Doncic, there's a lot of talented players in this tournament. Like Jokic played today. If you want to watch him play, you can get a subscription. It's $18.91 basketball. And it's like $19.99. This is not an ad. This is, I had to buy it myself. So, you can get that subscription and you can watch for the tournament. The entire tournament is $20. So I called my dad today. He loves watching basketball, and I gifted him the ability to watch EuroBasket at his office. So yeah, you can check that out. I would encourage you to, because there are 4 more group games coming, and then there's a knockout round, which Portugal may or may not make, but this was a good start for them to win a game by 12 points. We'll see how they fare against Serbia, who's coming up on Friday, and Serbia is one of the best teams in the field right now. So that'll definitely be a more challenging one. But yeah, curious, feel free to put in the chat your thoughts if you got to watch this game, your thoughts on how Queta performed. There were a couple times I think he got listed with 4 turnovers. I actually didn't feel like he had 4 turnovers. It was a couple of those were like, it was not a great pass and he didn't catch it. But there's always the question of like, who gets that turnover? So you can, I'm curious for people's thoughts, but overall, I thought that he was just everything you could have hoped for in the first EuroBasket game. And don't forget, Bobby Manning of CLNS Media reported earlier this summer that Queta had off-season knee surgery, which we don't have much detail about. I would imagine it was very minor because it's August and he's already playing in EuroBasket. But he did not look at all limited in any sense athletically. He was jumping out of the gym. And also he played 30 minutes, the most of anybody in the game. Also, he was I think he was a plus 21 in a game they won by 12. So just kind of goes to show you his impact. And in the third quarter, he sat for a while and they looked so much worse during that span that it was actually like they had to I was like getting stressed. I was like, put Queta back out there. Like they can't really play without him because he was just doing so much defensively as well and just deterring the Czech Republic players from even attempting to go to the basket. So those are my thoughts on Queta. Yeah, I was really very much encouraged by that performance. And again, when we talk about like what are the Celtics going to be next season and what's their ceiling and what are they going to look like, a lot of it comes down to like the range of outcomes for individual players. And I think Queta is one of the guys who has the biggest range of outcomes in the sense that he could be borderline unplayable, which is in theory what he's been. I mean, I don't think that he hasn't played because he's been unplayable, but he hasn't actually shown that he can be on the court and be impactful in big stints in the NBA consistently. Or he could be a guy who's putting up 15 points and 12 rebounds on any given night. And I'm leaning towards the second outcome, just based off of what we've seen from him in small stints, based on what I hear about his work ethic. And then seeing things like today, like EuroBasket and just his dominance there is really encouraging to watch. So he'll be back on Friday afternoon. I think it's 2:15 they play. And yeah, if you're in your office or you want to kind of put something in the background, you can check out Portugal's performance. I just love honestly watching EuroBasket because it's one of those things that just means so much to the players that play in it. Like obviously, if you are a Miami Heat fan, you can watch Jovic play for Serbia, and like it's a bigger game for him than probably any game you've watched him play on the Heat. So it does give you kind of a better sense of like what these players are capable of, especially when the pressure's on, because there's a lot of pressure. And I have guys that I love watching in EuroBasket, like Dennis Schroeder. I love that EuroBasket, FIBA, Dennis Schroeder, Olympics, Dennis Schroeder. Obviously, he hasn't been that player in the NBA, but it's still basketball and it's still valid. It's just a different style. So there's just different outcomes and kind of things to watch there. So yeah, but that was my thoughts on him, and I was super excited. And we have a quick message from our friends over at Prize Picks, and we're going to talk a little bit more about potentially kind of different combinations for next year's starting lineup, and my conversation with Peyton Pritchard about that, which was super interesting. PrizePicks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching sports. Join millions of users and sign up today. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports, combine your favorite basketball players with players from baseball, hockey, esports, and much more. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports takes into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. So yes, Queta looked great. Yeah, I'm seeing some people really catching up in the chat box here. Queta looked so good that maybe our front court won't be in such bad shape after all. Tom says, I think absolutely, like that's the biggest point of concern for Celtics fans is the front court and what the front court is going to look like. And I still think there are some questions because for one, like if he goes down for a month, like who else can you trust? Like who else do you want to play in those minutes? So I think a little bit of depth remains a priority, but Chris Boucher was a great signing in that sense. And because he's obviously somebody that has NBA experience and has played critical roles on different teams, long career with the Raptors. And I think that he can be a little bit of that insurance as well. He might end up being the starter alongside Queta. So depending on kind of how that goes, I'm not sure who the 5 starters are going to be. I've been asked this question a little bit. Right now, as I mentioned, Derek White and Jaylen Brown are the only two returners from the starting lineup. Jason Tatum will be out for most, if not all, of the season with an Achilles injury, as everybody here knows. Kristaps Porzingis with the Hawks. Watched him earlier today with Latvia. Al Horford, who I viewed as just a starter, obviously is expected to sign with the Warriors. I've seen reports of a 2-year contract, player option in the second year, so maybe opens the door on Al maybe coming back to Boston for a second year, though it's probably not likely at this point. And then obviously Drew Holiday with the Portland Trailblazers. So they lost 3 of their starters from last season /4, because I honestly consider Al to be like the 6th starter. So I would imagine right now it's going to be Peyton Pritchard, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, probably Chris Boucher and Neemias Queta to start. And then you have Sam Hauser potentially able to slot into that lineup for when they're going a little bit smaller. And Pritchard struggles as a starter or doesn't work, or they want Simons to be the starter alongside Derek White and have Pritchard come off the bench and run that unit, they're able to do that. They have that flexibility. So if you go with the starting lineup that I have in my head, which is Pritchard, White, Brown, Boucher, and Queta, then you'd have Anthony Simons and Sam Hauser coming off the bench, which is not too bad as far as scoring options go. And obviously Anthony Simons can create his own shot. He started, for what it's worth, every game the last 3 seasons that he's played with the Blazers. He's also averaged 19.3 points per game in his career. So this guy is a bucket. He has created his own shot. He scored at high volumes, was more efficient when he played alongside Damian Lillard and had more offensive options alongside him and maybe a little bit less pressure. So we'll see if he's able to become more efficient, if he's sharing the floor with Derek White and Jaylen Brown. Does that help? Does everybody else's efficiency go down? And suddenly you realize that the delta between him and Pritchard from an efficiency standpoint was actually who was around them. I'm not sure. I think the biggest question around Simons is defense and how he's going to hold up there. And that's historically been a question regarding Pritchard as well. I think he's a little bit of a more proven defender at this point than Anthony Simons is. But as I mentioned on my last podcast here for You Got Boston, which, again, you can check that out on YouTube if you haven't heard that full conversation, I went to an event on Saturday where Peyton Pritchard was hosting a one-on-one basketball tournament in Roxbury. It was a really cool tournament. I love one-on-one basketball. I love the culture around it. There was girls divisions, there were boys, middle school, high school. There was an adult men division as well. There was shooting competition. So it was just awesome to be a part of. And then afterwards, I did talk to Pritchard for 10 minutes about just the event, but also how he's feeling about next season, how he feels about the team. And there was 2 big takeaways that I took from our conversation. The first was they're not doing this whole gap year thing. And I know people are going to be like, well, obviously he's on the roster. He's not expected to be we're going to tank. But he looked me dead in the eye and he was like, there's no gap year. That discussion, that's not a thing. We are going to put the pieces together and we're going to go out and try to win every game and we're going to compete for a championship. And when he said that, I thought to myself, there's a world where in 6 months, this is the worst team in the Eastern Conference. And I go back to that conversation and I think to myself, NBA players are not always the most reliable narrators because they all think they're the best. They always have kind of this unwavering confidence. That's what makes them great. And then there's also a world where I go back and, in next April, and they're the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. And I think about how Peyton Pritchard in August looked at me like I was crazy when I brought up the concept of a gap year. I don't know which of those worlds we live in. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I will say that that's his mindset. I talked to Jaylen Brown last month at his camp. All these stories you can find on Celtics blog if you have. I can drop the links as well. But he said the same thing. We're going to go out and kind of prove to people that we're still that team. That was Pritchard's red quote. We are still that team. And I think people's first reaction is to laugh. And maybe that's your first reaction as well. And I don't know how verbatim to kind of take what he says, but that's the stand. That was my biggest takeaway from talking to him. When I left, I was like, I've had the Celtics around a 7 seed if I'm predicting where the Eastern Conference will fall next season. And then when I went home from that conversation, I was like, maybe 5th seed. It just felt like at that point, after hearing from him directly, I'm like, maybe I've been a little bit underrating this roster because they still have, kind of a lot of talented players, honestly, and they have a championship culture. They're still just a year removed or 2 years removed from winning a year and a few months removed from winning a title. That's crazy to think about, that 14 months ago was a championship and a banner raising was less than a year ago. That's crazy. But yeah, that was my first takeaway. I'm losing my train of thought here. The second takeaway that I had from talking to Peyton Pritchard is that the whole discussion around starters between him and Anthony Simons is irrelevant. He doesn't care about it. He doesn't want to think about it. He doesn't it just doesn't matter. And I think the online noise gets loud, especially this time of year when there's like not that much to talk about. But he said, the starting lineup is going to change a bunch of times. For me, it's just about becoming an unbelievable player. That's what he said. So this is not him being humble. Like, he wants to be an unbelievable player. That's his aspiration. And he feels like that's what he's going to work towards next year. And whether that's coming off the bench, whether that's starting, whether that's some games starting, some games coming off the bench, remains to be seen. So I think there's probably going to be a bunch of starting lineups for this team, especially early on. You're not going to see the same 5 ideal players. Like for the Celtics this year, if everybody was healthy, it was always going to be, Drew, Derek, Jalen, Tatum, and Porzingis. And if they weren't healthy, then, Al would slot in or whatever else. But that was the ideal 5. I think this year, even at full strength, there's going to be different iterations of this roster depending on who they're facing and depending on who's kind of meshing well. Who knows? Maybe one of these guys they picked up on a minimum becomes like a great signing, and all of a sudden Josh Minot is thoughts into the starting lineup. Like, I don't know. I've hardly seen the guy play. Like, I've gone back and watched, but he really hasn't had many opportunities even with the Wolves. So that's my prediction. But as Pritchard kind of reminded me, like, it's not going to be one starting lineup. It doesn't really matter. And I think he's ready for like a bigger role, bigger minutes, bigger opportunities, regardless of whether that's coming off as the reigning 6th man of the year and continuing to play off the bench, or whether that's leading this team as a starting point guard, which I've always thought he was capable of being a starting point guard. That's why I think he has all-star potential, but we'll see. This is the year that he's going to find that out. And I do think that he's the dream of many coaches. But we'll see, how that plays out. Like, he might have a tough shooting season. Who knows? He had a great shooting year last year. So many X factors. And I would love to be able to say, like, because I study everything about this team and I watch every game and I go to all these events, that I know all the answers. But the reality is, I'm just guessing like everybody else. I'm making informed guesses and I'm talking to people and I'm looking at the stats and watching film and all those things, but it's so unpredictable kind of where things are going to go from here. Glenn brings up an interesting point, like, what's Simon's future? Like, he might be traded again. I do think that there's a good chance that he does not finish next season on the Celtics. Because we're just about a month from training camp, like, I'm leaning towards him being on the roster at this point, but I would not be shocked at all if he gets traded in the middle of the season, because at the end of the day, he's on an expiring deal that's pretty expensive. $28 million. If they don't have plans to extend him, you probably want to get rid of that salary and get under the luxury tax for this season, instead of paying for a guy who's not a part of your long-term future, especially if they're not prioritizing winning. And in fact, maybe the front office wants them to be a little bit less competitive so that they get a better draft pick. So would not be shocked if Anthony Simons gets traded. I would not be shocked if he doesn't finish the season here in Boston. But at this point, just based on timing alone, I'm going to lean towards him being in Boston. And I've heard people be excited about him. I think he's a really talented player. I've heard good things about his character, his work ethic, all these things. So he's kind of been flying under the radar, and I'm responsible for this. I thought from the moment they acquired him, I thought that he was going to get dealt to some other team, whoever else. And so I think when we're thinking about next season, like, he's not even really in my head. I'm just thinking about the losses and the guys that are no longer on the roster, but he is potentially a guy that can come in and average 20 a night. And like, what does that mean for their ability to put together wins? I don't know. So we'll see. Walker here asks, what's your take on Xavier Tillman? My take on him is that at his best, he's a very switchable forward who can potentially even shoot the 3-ball, or at least, hit open threes, like maybe like a light Al Horford. I know that's what everybody thought when he first got to Boston, but the reality is that he just hasn't moved great in the last year. And last year, I think that it kind of went under the radar, the fact that he was dealing with a knee injury that required an off-season surgery, that required shots, that really limited him. So even just watching him walk around, like, he always looked like he was in a little bit of pain. So I don't know if he's going to be healthier this season. He might just have something that is not something that you can kind of nip in the bud. But if he is healthier, then I do expect to see him play a role in the rotation. To me, it looked like he lost his confidence a little bit too. Like, there were moments where he was just passing up open threes and dribbling into traffic. And it's like, he knows better than that. He knows the coaches don't want him to do that. But when you've lost confidence in your shot, like, sometimes you make that decision to just pass up an open three and kind of throw everything out of whack. So, I'm sure he's had a great offseason. He's not somebody that I've seen this summer. I think he's been mostly back home in Michigan. Is that where he is? I'm actually not sure where he is. He's done some camps in Michigan, but he hasn't been in Boston. So I don't know if, he's moving better, if he's gotten any procedures on his knee this summer. I'm sure we'll know soon. But he's going to be in the mix early on. And if he struggles or if he's kind of continuing to deal with pain, then that will certainly take kind of take him out of the equation. But I think that, yeah, he'll definitely be in the mix. Irvin asks, is Hauser going to solve his consistency issues this year? I think first, a couple thoughts on this. I think for one, I do feel like people find out Sam Hauser to be more inconsistent than he actually is, just because the nature of his job is to come in and hit threes, and 3-point shots are inherently somewhat inconsistent. Like, there's a very few shooters in the entire league that are like, you can pretty much count on every night to be on. Like Steph Curry's consistency across his career has been pretty remarkable. Like, it's part of the game of being a 3-point shooter. And in the big picture, as I've, everybody knows this line, I think, at this point, but he's never shot below 40% for a given season. So big picture, he is consistent. But what I know what you mean, though. You want to see every night that he doesn't have a night where he has, 6 threes one game because they're leaving him open or because they're playing a less good team, and then 0 points in 2 consecutive games. Like, I think that's what fans are talking about when they discuss his consistency issues. I think a lot of it has been small sample size and changing role. You talk about Peyton Pritchard, like not last season, but the year they won the championship, 23, he was more inconsistent. And I think something I've talked to him about is, like, when you have an inconsistent role and you don't know when you're going to play, you don't know what shots you're going to get, it's much harder to be more consistent. So I think this season, Sam Hauser is going to be a guy who, I mean, we'll see how it plays out, but I think he's going to, get 10, 12 shots a game. They're actually going to run plays for him, which they didn't really run plays for him in the last couple seasons. I don't know if people are aware of that, but, like, he got open threes off other people's actions for the most part. And so that should help his consistency issues, like just this idea that he can know what to expect. He's going to have more minutes, more opportunities. And again, he's another guy that's on a longer term contract. So there's going to be interest in continuing to invest in him. Not that you don't care about the other guys, but, like, there was a world where, like, Georges Niang was on this roster. And if Niang was on the roster and Sam Hauser was on the roster, like, you're now splitting those minutes for no good reason. So, like, I'm glad that Sam's going to have those opportunities. And I do think that he's going to be a guy who has, again, kind of flown off the radar, under the radar this offseason, but could be a double-figure scorer, could be one of the primary scoring options in this team, honestly, which I know maybe sounds alarming to people, but he might have the ability to kind of add layers to his game, kind of like how Duncan Robinson was able to, where he was driving to the basket more, cutting more, like not just being the standstill shooter, shooting off the dribble more. So he's been incorporating those things into his game, but it's such a small sample size that I don't know if people even have really noticed. But that's coming. And I think you're going to see him exploring offensively a little bit more as well, which should help because it's easier to hit a three when you've also got into the line, made a layup, all of those things. And now he's going to have the opportunity potentially to diversify his game and see the ball go through the rim, which goes a really long way as a shooter, not just having your first shot just be a 3-pointer. So that is that. Feel free to continue putting questions in the chat box. I do want to talk a little bit about Hugo Gonzalez, who I saw both on Saturday and on Sunday. Hugo's been in Boston for the last couple of weeks, obviously made his Celtics debut at Summer League. Overall, I would say it was a difficult Summer League for him. Like, he showed flashes of why the Celtics drafted him in the first round, but he also struggled with his shot. I think he turned the ball over a little bit. Like, he looked like a 19-year-old. He looked like a rookie. And I just inherently, as a rule, do not overreact to Summer League, both positively and negatively. Baylor Shireman, I don't know if people still remember this point, but Baylor Shireman really struggled from the field at Summer League. Jordan Walsh had a very good Summer League. Doesn't necessarily mean that Jordan's going to be better than Baylor next year. I don't know. Going into Summer League, I would have not guessed that. So we'll see how it goes. It's all kind of an open question. But definitely, I think Hugo is a guy who just is going to need a little bit of time. And so he was, in Vegas with the team. That was in late July. And then he's now been in Boston for the last 2 weeks. And a lot of guys have been working out at the Auerbach Center. Peyton Pritchard told me that he was in the Cape for a lot of the summer. He was traveling around. He hosted a camp in Spain. He was in his home in Oregon. He played at a Pro-Am tournament in Canada. You might have seen he dropped 16 points in that. So a lot of stuff going on for Peyton. But last week or so, he's been at the Auerbach Center working out. Hugo, last 2 weeks, has been in Boston. So everybody's starting to come back. It's still a month from training camp, but the facilities are open for players, and they're able to kind of take advantage of those. So Saturday, Hugo did a signing at like a Tom Brady card vault event right outside of TD Garden Saturday morning. Baylor Shireman was there right after, but I wasn't there for Baylor because I was at Pritchard's one-on-one tournament. So as I said, it was a busy weekend of events. But Sunday, Ugo was leading a basketball clinic at a really, really awesome event called Hoops and Hope in West Medford. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this. I'm actually going to drop a link to the story that I just wrote in the chat box here. So for those of you that want to read it, you are welcome to. But he was, you can see this is the first event on Saturday where he was like meeting fans, and I asked him, like, are you getting sick of like signing things? And he was like, no. Like, it's just funny because he hasn't actually played in the NBA yet, so I think there's a level of like expectation. But yeah, on Sunday you can see he was hosting a basketball clinic in West Medford. This was totally volunteer. This was not like, a lot of times NBA players have commitments through different corporate sponsorships, or they get paid for appearances and things like that. This was not that. Like, he just went. I think he knew somebody that was hosting it and he wanted to be a part of this, and just really hung out with the kids for hours and took photos with every kid that asked, signed autographs. Like, as I mentioned before, like, he's just such a professional because he played for Real Madrid, and I think he's just really, really excited to be in Boston, really loving the community. He's told me multiple times that Boston really reminds him of home. And it is kind of a European city. I don't know. I know people have said that over the years. So it was cool to catch up with him. It was cool to see the imprint that he had in West Medford, which is a predominantly Black community that is very close knit. I talked to a bunch of people there. It sounds like really special. It really, like, just everybody kind of looks out for one another. There's a big, like, culture around Durham Park, the basketball courts where this event was held. And he answered questions from kids. Some kids were asking him, when is he going to retire, which I thought was pretty funny. He said that he is hoping to not retire anytime soon. Obviously, he talked about how Pau Gasol was kind of his hero growing up. He talked about a bunch of different things, but really, like, it was all about the kids and about inspiring them. And a fun wrinkle there is that George Niang was also at the event, who is a Massachusetts native, who obviously was on the Celtics for a couple of weeks, but not really, because he was traded from the Hawks, and then traded to the Jazz earlier this month. So he was on the roster for a few weeks, a few very unpopular weeks, I might add. That I know a lot of fans did not want to see Niang in Boston, but he was also great, very engaged in this event. And it was funny because it was Ugo and George together signing autographs, taking photos with the kids. And I thought to myself, what could have been? This could have been two Celtics teammates, Shabazz Napier, who is now playing overseas but was in the NBA, who was from Roxbury, who was the third NBA player that was at this clinic. But it was super cool. You can read the full story. I put the link in the chat. But yeah, I think Ugo is just like really embracing Boston. And I know, like, that's a nice thing. It's not a must have. Like, you don't have to immediately fall in love with the city to be a Celtics player. But I do kind of get the sense from him that over the last few weeks, and also when he first got to Boston, like, this is just culturally, like, pretty similar to Europe. You've heard, like, Porzingis talk about that as well. Like, obviously he's from Latvia. It's different than Spain, but there is like a European feel in Boston to some people. So I think that it helps make his experience a little bit smoother. And it was just cool to see because he's already really good with kids. He's already really good with these kinds of events. Like, it seems like he's been doing them his whole life. And so I'm sure he'll become kind of a staple in that sense. And again, I know this is like kind of I don't want to give too much credit to somebody for, volunteering a few hours of their time, but it is pretty unusual to see NBA players just go to like a random event like this, not because they have to for some obligation or the Celtics are hosting something or a partnership they have. Like, he just went because he thought it was cool. And you could see, how he was playing one-on-one with the kids. He was showing them different things. He was answering all their questions. So it was very cool. And I enjoyed kind of being there. And obviously, Celtics training camp starts in late September. So we're still almost a month away from that. So we'll see if there's other events, other things happening in the city. But the last week or so, you could feel that a lot of players are back in Boston because all of a sudden I have a full calendar again of events to go to. So that was fun. But really the big headliner today is Neemias Queta and just his dominance with EuroBasket. And that's something that I'll be monitoring in the next couple weeks here. The tournament ends in mid-September, so it just got started today. So if you missed this game, it's not too late. You can get that subscription to 1891 basketball. It's $20, and you can watch all of the EuroBasket games. So not just Portugal, but all the countries that are participating. It's 24 countries that are in it, 16 advance to the knockout rounds. And this is like the premier European tournament that takes place every 4 years. So you see a lot of great players are showing out for it. Ugo did not make the Spanish team, which is not like the most stunning thing. Like he's really young. I've heard it's not like an old team, but he did not make that team. So Spain is in there. He's not on the roster. The only Celtic player who is on the playing in EuroBasket is Queta, obviously. It'd be fun if there was like 4 players that ran it. So, yeah. I have to answer this question though. Walker Phillips said, "Did you know that Cade Cunningham is vegan? How can one average 26 points with an inadequate calorie intake?" First of all, I did know he was vegan. I wasn't sure. Like, people change their dietary habits all the time. So I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't sure that he still was vegan. But what I will say is that I'm vegan. I think people here know this, or at least some of my listeners know this. And you can totally have an adequate calorie intake and have enough protein and have enough of everything as a vegan. Jaylen Brown used to be vegan. I've talked to him about it. He said that he was faster. So like there's pros and cons to these things, right? When you know, maybe it's a little bit harder to build certain muscle or whatever, and they change their diets all the time based on what their current goals are. But they are vegan NBA players. Chris Paul has been vegan. If Cade Cunningham is still vegan, then kudos to him for doing that. Being able to maintain that, I'm sure you have to be even more intentional as an NBA player than I have to be, and I have to be a little bit intentional as well, just to make sure I'm getting everything I need. But anyways, that's besides the point. I had to answer that question. How many Celtics games will Ugo play in this season? I'm going to guess like 25 or something, 30, maybe somewhere in that ballpark, because I do think that he's going to be in Maine for the first portion of the year. And so after that, like, you know, he'll probably move up. Like Baylor did the first half of the year in Maine, and then he went up to Boston the second half, or down to Boston, I should say, the second half of the year. I could see Ugo doing something similar. And don't be alarmed if Ugo's learning curve is bigger than Baylor's, because Baylor was 4 years older than him, right? You know, so he was a little bit more NBA ready. Both first round picks too. So it's not like one was a lottery pick and one was a second rounder or something like that. And yes, Spain was the last champion of EuroBasket 4 years ago. But I was looking at the power rankings, and like I think Serbia is like the front runner right now from what kind of exhibition play and expectations. I don't know like all the overseas players that are not in the NBA, so I kind of, that's part of why I like watching EuroBasket, so I can get up to speed on all the great basketball players that you don't get to watch in the NBA during the season, because I don't really watch European leagues during the year because I just don't have time. But this is a good way to catch up on those. I'll answer this question. Best of 10 corner threes, how many am I making? I'm really not great from the corner, actually. It's like my worst spot along the 3-point line. So probably like maybe 3 or 4. If I was top of the key, I would say like 7. So big range. Like I pretty much don't shoot from the corners because just like optically, even though I know it's closer, but it's just never been my shot. Unpopular take from a shooter. Irvin here writes, Ugo got some really bad reviews from the media after Summer League. Hope that doesn't affect him negatively. I don't know if this is a reference to like European media or Boston or Celtics media. I think he struggled. I'm sure that he is has people in his court and all of that. And if it helps him, Al Horford struggled as a rookie. Sam Hauser struggled in his first Summer League. Jordan Walsh had a terrible Summer League last year. Like Baylor had a tough Summer League this time around. Like it happens all the time. Like a lot of players that went on to be good NBA players really struggled in Summer League. And then also you can go back and look at the Summer League MVPs and the Summer League all starting teams. And a lot of those guys end up not having good NBA careers. So there's just not a big correlation between being a good NBA player and being really good in Summer League, at least not as big as you would think. Obviously there's some correlation. So I'm sure it won't affect him too negatively. He did get down on himself after games, but I think he also, like the next day, he was able to have perspective. Like it was like right in the immediate. It felt like he was upset at himself, and then he was kind of able to move forward from that. What is the ceiling for Jordan Walsh this year? The ceiling for Jordan is a guy who is like maybe 6th or 7th man. Like I don't foresee him being a starter for this team, but I could see him being like a really important rotation player who shoots from 3 at like a 38% clip, super respectable, and is averaging 10 points a game and guards at one of the opposing teams like good forwards. Like I think that's a possibility for this season. Very realistically too. So that could be him. Like I've said this before, but like there's Jordan Walsh, there's Baylor Shireman, there's Sam Hauser, Sam's in a little bit different category. There's Ugo. Like a lot of these, some of these guys are going to stick and some of them aren't. And I think Jordan had a great Summer League. He's been in the league now. He's entering his 3rd season. So I could see him being ready to take on a bigger role, and that it could look like that. So, yeah, and becoming a better rebounder certainly helps. Like, I think they're going to want him to be that energy guy. Tatum has been the Celtics' best rebounder for his entire career, so that's another thing that they lose with Tatum being gone. Al Horford's gone, so like they have to figure that out. Obviously, Queta is going to be able to help in that department, but it's going to be a full team effort. I think Jordan's going to be one of the guys that is going to have to step up if he's in the rotation. Anybody that's in the rotation is going to have to rebound. And if you look at the guys they draft, they always draft players who are good rebounders for their position. Even like RJ Lewis, who they just traded for as a 2A, has a strength in that regard. So I think that's it for questions. Thank you all, as always, for joining. And I appreciate the time. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate all of the engagement. Subscribe to the You Got Boston podcast on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Check it out on Spotify. If you ever want to just have it come up on your screen, whatever you listen to podcasts, it appears there as well, not just on YouTube. Share it with your friends, all of that. So, and I'm trying to think what else. Oh yeah, if you missed the Peyton Pritchard interview, I thought it was a really good interview. You can find that on CLNS Media. It's the episode right before this of mine. So enjoy the rest of your days. We'll be back. I'm sure some more content coming soon. And enjoy watching Nemi continue to hopefully dominate EuroBasket.